James O'Keefe, dressed as an Ebola-infected ISIS terrorist to sneak across Lake Erie from Canada to Cleveland and into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame without being challenged once. Just showing that the hundreds of billions spent a year, hundreds of billions of dollars on, quote, intelligence is all a giant joke, ladies and gentlemen. And the entire Homeland Security system, he was dressed up in an al-Qaeda outfit, in a frog boat, in a Navy boat, an inflatable, drove in and simulated basically smuggling in Ryerson, Ebola, you name it, to draw attention to the fact that our border's wide open. And I imitate anything that's successful. That's why we sent Joe Biggs down to the border last week to show that he could simulate a beheading right outside downtown El Paso, dressed as an ISIS fighter, and then come across with an ISIS flag and declare America for ISIS, basically. It is stunts like these that illustrate how ridiculous. In fact, we ought to simulate, you can go to an Army-Navy store or buy them online, a used rocket launcher. I got to think about this, though. There could be some legal issues, but anybody could do it. I don't recommend you do, folks, before you think it out. I'm just brainstorming. And go sit out on the edge of an airfield where planes are at 5,000 feet, dressed as a jihadi, and simulate shooting it down to illustrate that 15,000 MPADs have been given to al-Qaeda in Iraq and Syria, now known as ISIS or IS. And that leads us to the next story here. By the way, that's something Navy SEALs famously have done a lot to show that embassy security is wide open or not being followed properly by the Marines that guard them. The Navy will run its other naval commandos, that's just another branch, basically, up against the Marines and try to have them get into the base and simulate blowing it up or killing people. Again, we're just here illustrating, James O'Keefe is here illustrating, that it's all security theater and a giant joke. There have been radical, jihadi, expansionist, imperial Muslims since the time after Muhammad's death, the founder of Islam. They're in what is Saudi Arabia today. But there have been moderate versions of Islam. There have been many different configurations of that. The Ottoman Empire that was able to take over Constantinople and the headquarters of the Byzantine Empire in what is Turkey today. There's a long history there. But in World War I, you saw different power structures fighting on different sides. The world witnessed the Turks allied with the Germans. So there was a battle over who could control the Arabs and who could control the Muslims and who would snap up the pieces that were left at the end of World War I. British intelligence goes in and creates what is Saudi Arabia today. That's on record. By arming Bedouin tribes who could only be described as bandits, as desert and hill people who lived in basically 3,000-year-old style dwellings, open-air tents. These are the people British intelligence set up. These are the people that now dominate Islam worldwide. And they were undoubtedly involved in 9/11. They were undoubtedly involved in the ISIS takeover of Syria and now Iraq and Libya. They are publicly giving the weapons to them. Now, when Hitler took over the Middle East and North Africa in World War II, he got the keys for about 3-4 years to the Muslim Brotherhood and the Caliphate and all these different groups. And then as soon as Hitler was defeated, the keys to the city of Islamic extremism were given again into the hands of British intelligence. They used radical Islam to overthrow the secular government of Iran. Then they double-crossed the Muslim extremist and put the Shah in. Then they double-crossed him and put the Ayatollahs in. Yes, they put them in. Iran-Contra deal, all of it. But it's lots of double and triple crossing. And here's the bottom line. That type of culture creates squalor and creates pain and creates unstable civilizations. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend is not the way to live. Machiavellian politics were similar in what is Italy today, with the different city-states constantly fighting with each other and changing alliances and everyone having to live in armored fortresses because they might be killed any minute. It's a very unstable way to run your society. And the black nobility, the Venetian black nobility that basically ran to Scotland and to England about 700, 800 years ago, when people weren't sure if the Arabs weren't going to be able to successfully take over Italy, like they'd done Constantinople and what is Turkey today. So a bunch of those rich people ran out of Italy, and they all ran to basically England and France and Scotland. And so the system we live under is cutthroat, manipulative, triple dealing, triple crossing, no honor, incredibly corrupt. It's the system that Italy was under, and I'm just giving you basic gestalts here, after the fall of Rome in 410, when it was Byzantine. Again, Italy, what is Italy today? Not run out of Italy, but run out of what is Turkey. It was Christian. It's not the Roman system they had before that was based on honor and family and tradition. That then again was corrupted in the decline of the Roman Empire. The point I'm getting at here is this mindset of being cutthroat and backstabbing and dishonorable, that's what I call it, is not only centered in and around Saudi Arabia. Those forms of thinking also have been going on in Europe for a very long time. And you have the Machiavellian school that is in direct competition with what you would call the school of Western chivalry, which is based on being honorable and stable and truthful and everything being your family name and never double dealing. But there was plenty of treachery went on as well in Western Europe. There's just different schools and different systems. Our government has a Machiavellian or almost Arabian, you could also call it, system of looting and betrayal and dishonor and double and triple dealing. See, I said I'd get into a short history lesson, and then it starts turning into a long one because these issues are so deep and so complex, but also so simple. Here's what I'm getting at. The West didn't want stable, secular, upright, prosperous Middle Eastern countries. There was a major school of that there going back to the time of Egypt and before. Mathematics, so many of the sciences developed, invented there. Very high IQs, smart people. But that has all been removed and turned over to the Saudi Arabian extremists. And that's what the West wants, is a bunch of backwards, barbarous, suppressed people that they can then use to menace the West so the establishment can then take our basic liberties here. So when you hear about Ronald Reagan or Jimmy Carter, quote, creating Al-Qaeda and having them attack the Russians, they didn't create them. there was a relationship going back to British intelligence before that, again, specifically in Afghanistan, not just in Saudi Arabia. And so when we then see Obama caught with Benghazi, giving 15,000 surface-to-air IMPAD missiles that can shoot down aircraft all day long, and all these other weapons to the al-Qaeda rebels in Syria, and the whole thing that's happened in Iraq, all of it has been orchestrated by the globalists in D.C., in London, in Tel Aviv, in Istanbul, formerly Constantinople. And so there is no debating that the people running our government planned this whole deal. This war against ISIS is totally staged. The only reason it's happening is that there's such public education now about who really runs this and that it's al-Qaeda. They changed the name 2 or 3 times to IS, to ISIS, back to IS, now to the Caliphate, back to the Caliphate, to confuse you. And they'll show a truck getting blown up every few days with nobody running away from it, with no big explosions around it. Clearly, this is all staged. And they did this when they invaded Afghanistan in 2001. That's why we quote won in a week, because they would just have 14-year-old conscripts up front in grids that our troops could bomb, when the real Taliban and al-Qaeda was then paid in gold, put on U.S. C-130s flown out to safety in Pakistan. It was called the airlift of evil. So they just repeat all this over and over again. So when Obama says the war will take years, they mean that when the jihadi nuts get out of line and go into a place they're not supposed to and loot it, they'll be bombed there just to keep them in line. It's like hurting them. I began to get into iodine a few years ago because it was helping me and my family so much get healthy and detoxify. I believe our research is conclusive. This is the best iodine out there. And I know this for a fact. Nobody else has got iodine based on these pure crystals, ladies and gentlemen. For a limited time, experience the ancient power of Survival Shield X2. Take advantage of this unprecedented 30% off Super Detox Special at InfoWarsLife.com.